So, you've signed up for a game jam. The clock is ticking, the theme just dropped, and now you're staring at a blank screen, wondering, where do I even start? Game jams can be some of the most exciting, chaotic, and fun experiences in game development. They challenge you to think fast, get creative, and make something unique in a super short amount of time. However, without the right approach, it's very easy to feel overwhelmed by the time limit. That's why in this video, I'm going to share some of my best tips to help you make the most out of game jams and improve your chances of making a game you're proud of, even under pressure. First, we'll cover what makes game jams so unique and why they're worth your time as a game developer. Then I'll give you my best tips, things I really wish I knew earlier to help you make better games faster. And if you want to follow along, I've also put together a simple presentation which is linked in the description of the video. So first of all, what are game jams? Well, I've searched far and wide and I found Wikipedia. And it says right here that a game jam is an event where participants try to make a video game from scratch. Depending on the format, participants might work independently or in teams, usually with a time limit. It says 24 to 72 hours, but as some of you know, that's not entirely correct. So what makes game jams unique? Well, the first element is that you have to make a game from scratch. That's the entire idea of the game jam. This means that the gameplay should be tailor-made for the jam. However, you can use small scripts for example, screen shake to make things feel better. Or, I don't know, some pre-made art assets, some open source art assets, for example. As long as it's not tailor-made specifically for the jam ahead of time, which would be kind of unfair. Another element is a limited time frame. So I've seen jams that range from 24 hours to jams that are a week long to a couple weeks long. Ultimately, it's up to you to pick a jam that has a length that works for you. The third element that makes jams unique is a theme. So the theme is usually a word or a phrase that's announced before the jam. The idea is that part of the challenge is to develop a game that fits the theme. For example, some past themes in jams that I've been to were Bubbles for the Global Game Jam. This was a really tough theme, by the way. Calm Before the Storm was another theme, and Lost and Found. Both of these will be in the examples later on in the video. In many jams, your game will also be ranked based on various factors, which change based on the jam. So, for example, this would be like how good the art is, or how good the gameplay is, or how well your game fits the theme of the jam. So making something that works with a jam theme is pretty important. So why should you participate in game jams? There's many reasons, right? First of all, it's a great opportunity to actually meet other game devs and get out of your house or get out of your little online bubble. It's also a great place to hone your skills and really practice finishing a game in a limited time frame. Finishing games is like the top skill if you actually want to make games, because you could be making a game for many years and never release it or never have anybody play it. So if you can finish a game in a limited amount of time like that, then you're well on your way to releasing multiple things on Steam. Also, in many past game jams, some legendary games have been created. For example, Surgeon Simulator, Baba Is You, Octodad, Mini Metro. All of these actually amazing games have started as a little prototype at the game jam. Isn't that kind of crazy? Also, game jams are a ton of fun. That feeling that you get when you have a finished game by the end time is like nothing else. Also, if you finish a game at the game jam and it's good, maybe you can refine it a tiny bit more and then sell it on Steam. So, I don't know, that's some profit. Yeah, so where do you find game jams? That's another big question. There's a ton of game jams on itch.io. There's also various extremely well-known game jams like the Global Game Jam, which is local. I've participated in it earlier in 2025. It was a ton of fun. There's also things like the Ludum Dare, which is maybe the longest running game jam, and the GMTK, which is another massive game jam. Sometimes communities, like various YouTubers or, I don't know, your local game dev people can organize game jams. For example, the Finnish game jam, if you're in Finland, which I'm not, but I'm just aware it exists. There's also some game jams that are specific to various genres, like for roguelikes or for dungeon crawlers. And I know that there was a Boss Rush game jam recently, which is also kind of cool. Right, so how do you find people to team up with for the jam? Because usually you're gonna need multiple disciplines, like a composer, or an artist, or a programmer. Where do you find these people? First of all, usually if it's like a community jam, I don't know, like of some developer, or YouTuber, or what have you, they'll have like a Discord, and you can find other developers there that are also participating, or artists, or what have you. Usually there'll also be like itch.io forums in the jam page, where people will be like, oh, I'm looking for this and this. I need a 2D artist. I need a 3D artist. Our team is looking for a voice actor, etc. And if you're at a local game jam, you're just gonna have to say hello and talk to people and make new friends. Now, I can already hear some people saying, help, I don't have a team. I can't be social. That's crazy. It's crazy talk. Can I just go solo? And the answer is, yeah, obviously you can. However, if you do go solo, you're kind of missing out on a big part of the experience of actually like meeting people and forming new connections and like having fun and stuff. Also, another aspect of it is that by teaming up with people, even if they're not necessarily like part of the, I don't know, core development, like some of my best game jam ideas and feedback have been from non-developer people, like from artists or from composers. Yeah, also just having another person that you can consult with about stuff is just so handy. All right, part 2, and this is where I share all of my tips and tricks. There are some really good ones, even if you're a jam veteran, so get ready. But beforehand, I'll share my experience with 2 game jams that I've participated in. The first one was the first Neuro Jam in 2024. It was a small jam. First of all, Neuro is like this AI VTuber. Someone took an LLM and turned it into a cute anime girl on Twitch. And yeah, she's funny and like comes up with random things. And there is a community around her. So I participated in that game jam and teamed up with a composer. There are only 120 participants, so it wasn't like massive amount of competition. But still, it was a lot of fun. And I got 3rd place overall, which is crazy. And number 1 in the fun category. The second game jam that I want to mention, the Brackeys Game Jam, where I teamed up with a programmer and I met at the previous game jam that I mentioned. And we placed 27th, but the first place got kicked because they cheated. So 26 out of 1.5k entries, which is crazy. It means top 2% basically. And that's despite troubles and difficulty that we had with some technical stuff. And we also had a composer that joined us and also did the sound effects, which were amazing. And I did the voice acting for the first time, which was also kind of crazy. It took a whole week to get this game done. And I turned out actually really well. The theme here was Calm Before the Storm. So we ended up deciding on like a solar storm. This was the composer's idea, by the way. So shout out to him. Right, so here's some actionable tips for your next game jam. First of all, temper your expectations, right? You shouldn't go into the game jam expecting to create a masterpiece, your end goal has to be a finished working game, or, well, as working as a game jam game can be. So limit your scope, right? That being said, you should still make something that you're going to be excited about making, right? For this end, what you should do is consider multiple ideas, and really, if you have time, spend like some of it looking into various ideas and really examining them and seeing why you would rather work on one thing or another thing, or which thing increases or reduces your scope. Another tip is to rely on tech you already know, especially for shorter jams, but even outside of it, you can try like new tech for jams and learn things, and I've seen people do that. However, it can also mean having random technical difficulties at the worst time ever, right? So, for example, in the Brackeys Jam, when we made the Solar Storm on the ISS, we decided to try out Fmod for the first time, which is like something for audio integration. And we ended up having a lot of difficulties with it, especially like at the last moment, where we had to make sure that like things work and things broke eventually. And on some browsers, the audio on that game is extremely messed up. But we still got 26th place. So I don't know. Maybe things worked out eventually somehow. Another helpful tip is to have some free assets ahead of time. For example, like sound effects or some sprites or something, right? This is eventually going to help you like save time, especially again for shorter jams. For example, in the Neuro Jam, I relied on the character sprite that another community member made, and that helped me a lot. Even though like I had to set up the animation in Unity and add a lot of like little polish touches, make it really feel like best. That wouldn't exist without like the infrastructure of actually having like good sprites to work with. What I recommend to that end is like having a list on itch.io or like bookmarks in other websites of various like handy assets. Another thing that you generally want to do is to schedule your time effectively, and you also want your game to be playable as soon as possible, and also like have finished content. Why? What's the reason for that? David, I have so little time. Why do you want me to have a playable game so early on? The answer to that is pretty simple. If you have a finished game early, or a playable game early rather, then you're going to be able to have time to bug fix it and to polish it, which is very important if you want players to actually enjoy your game and not run into awful bugs. Another handy tip is to cut content that would take too long mercilessly. Systems too. Just everything that would be nice to have but isn't really necessary for the final game, edit in the later list and then never touch it. Or just, I don't know, delete it altogether, okay? Save it for the file Steam version, right? Another important tip is to always have communication and transparency as a team, right? And you also have to have a to-do list. So everybody knows what they're working on, and people don't like just go off to do their own thing that is not really necessary to the game or anything like that. Also, always be kind to each other in a team. Yeah, you're ultimately in a game jam to have fun and to have a good experience and good time, and other jammers are there for that goal too. So yeah, be mindful. And a final tip for this slide, at least, is to not self-destruct, okay? I know that when people go to game jams and, I don't know, like sleep there, for example, in the global game jam, or don't sleep even, right? And like pull all-nighters and such on energy drinks and what have you. So try to not do that and not self-destruct, and your game will thank you for it, right? Because ultimately, if you're really tired and unfocused, then that means your game will have bugs that you might have not written had you been fully alright and well rested. And also, you're just going to be wrecked after. So be mindful of that too. Here's some more game jam tips. You should generally try to make web builds for the game if you expect people to play it, because people generally don't like downloading games from random strangers on itch.io. However, if you have a build on the web, a web export basically, then it's way easier to just run it in your browser and not have to worry about like viruses or what have you. Speaking of itch.io, it's really good if you can design a nice game page and have a great cover art or like thumbnail so people could actually click on it and check it out. To this end, it's good to have artists, cracked artists, and it's also good to have some time that you put aside to actually design the page or the thumbnail. Of course, with this kind of stuff, you can delay it for after the jam, right? Because you can edit the page after the time limit. However, yeah, I don't know, it's still good to be mindful of that in your scheduling. Also, don't forget to talk to other devs and like make connections. I probably mentioned this earlier, but you know, even if they're not part of your team, you can just like meet a lot of other really cool devs and great people. And ultimately, who knows, you might meet them again in like a future jam or something. If you have a big team, it's also extremely important that you have some people that organize other people. The rule that I heard is that for every 5 developers or 5 people at your team, you need one person to organize them and actually know like what everybody is doing or making. When I participated in the global game jam earlier this year, we had a team of like 8 people or something. So we did have some like a guy or 2 that were acting as producers and in charge of the game design and like making sure that everybody does stuff properly. And I also helped them a tiny bit. Also, if you can, take some time to reflect after the jam. Especially if you worked with a team, you can figure out like what worked and what didn't, and what everyone like liked about the game, etc., etc. What do you think pain points were for players or things that players struggled with? And the most important tip is to have fun. Like, again, game jams are ultimately for you to take part in and grow your skills and make something cool, hopefully by the end of it, or something finished. So yeah, be kind and like enjoy your time. And yes, the challenge is part of the fun. Be sure to leave some time at the end for polishing your game. What does that mean? Adding all sorts of little neat particle effects, adding little juice animations like having your characters squash and stretch. Also adding like screen shake to make things feel right when you get hit or when you attack. There are also some things you might want to discard, like having a tutorial. Ain't nobody got time to add an in-depth in-game tutorial for things, so just having a tutorial in the description of your itch.io page is generally good enough. Or having a how to play menu if you're feeling really fancy with just like an image of the controls. Another thing you might want to discard is menus. And when I say that, I mean having a main menu. Ain't no game ever won a game jam thanks to having a great main menu. It is nice to have, but having a complete game is far more important. Also cutscenes. I kind of have a problem with cutscenes. I always try to add them to my jam games, and I usually just end up cutting them out, or instead having just like a slideshow or something like that, or some text and an image as a replacement for the cutscene. And that's basically it. Game jams can be a wild ride, but ultimately, as long as you have the right mindset, they can be one of the best ways to get better as a game developer. Whether your game turns out absolutely amazing at the end or extremely scuffed, every game jam is a chance to learn, experiment, and most importantly, have fun. If you found this video helpful, consider leaving a like, which really helps me out. Also, if you have your own game jam tips or crazy jam stories, feel free to drop them in the comments. Oh, and don't forget that the presentation is linked in the description. And yeah, thank you for watching. Good luck on your next game jam. Hope to see you there.